Hello and welcome to episode 7 of the Goulet Q&A. I'm Brian Goulet of the Goulet Pen Company and Ink Nouveau, and this is an open forum discussion this week talking about anything related to fountain pens, ink, paper, anything that you asked me. I actually kind of dove further back and got some old questions that have been asked in previous weeks that I never got around to, so I'm going to kind of keep things going that way too. I don't want you to think that I'm forgetting about you. I am kind of keeping a log of older questions and stuff, and I'll be doing that. But before I get into the questions, I did want to just cover a couple things. In the last week or so, I've gotten in some new field notes stuff, which is really kind of cool. Aaron Draplin's got some just really cool design stuff going on. Comes out with these seasonal things, and I thought this one was pretty neat. It's a theme on beer, and it's in kind of autumn colors. Different browns, reds, yellows, stuff like that. And it's got a coaster that comes with it. It's got gold staples, gold ruling, really kind of neat. And if you get the 2-3 packs together, it creates a 6-pack, kind of neat. So just neat. It's got this kind of rubbery texture to it, just like the Rhodia Premiums, if you've ever used those, or the Rhodia Unlimited notebook. It feels a lot like that. So kind of neat. I just always like seeing what Field Notes comes out with. I've got some other new pens like the Pilot Justus 95 and the Stargazer. I do plan on doing videos on those. I haven't yet as of this point. I'm sure you might have some questions about those, and you can feel free to ask me, in the comments if you do have questions specifically about those. I am going to be working on a video on those, but I have been playing around with those, wanted to put some thought into how I was going to do those videos. And then of course I've gotten a lot of questions about these guys right here. I've alluded to the fact that I wanted to wait to do it, and I thought, you know what the heck, this is the right week. So there is kind of a story behind these guys. Okay, so I've kind of been sneaking them into my videos. Really, I just did it for fun. I just kind of wanted to see, how many people would notice it and what kind of reaction I'd get. And I've had a lot of questions about them. I did sneak in the big one last week, and so there's a story behind it. All right, so when I was, maybe 8 years old or so, I was at, I think it was a Discovery store or something like that. A store with all kinds of scientific things and just trinkets and stuff that just like, it was heaven for kids. And I was there, and my parents, when I was a kid, had a business in the house, and so I would do small things for them, for chores around the business, stapling invoices to manila folders for a penny a piece and that kind of stuff. And they had a little checkbook for me, and I had like the bank of mom and dad, and I would use it to buy toys and whatever random junk that you want as an 8-year-old. And this was one of the things that really kind of struck me. And I was at the store, and they had a small one and a big one. And if I remember correctly, I think the small one was $8.95 or something like that, and the big one was like $15.95. And as an 8-year-old, I really couldn't afford the big one, even though I really wanted the big one. So I bought the small one, and it was like one of my favorite things growing up, as I was just playing or being in my room or just hanging out or whatever, I would just sit and watch this thing. And it does so many cool things. It just has this drip that kind of comes down here, and then as the stuff comes down, it has this bubble that kind of comes up and floats up to the top, and then the bubble actually protrudes up to the top and over the rest of the ooze here. And then it has like this little drip that comes from the top, and then it'll come down and hit the bubble there, and then you'll have the ooze that's around the side here that'll come down. And it's really cool. It's kind of like an hourglass. I think it's estimated to be around 12 minutes or something like that, but honestly it's not very precise. It's not really the point. So it was funny because I had this, and once we moved the business out of the house and I had my office here, I was like, oh, I gotta have my little ooze tube, So I kept talking about, anybody that would see this thing would always be like, oh, what is that thing? That's so cool. And I would tell the whole story about how when I was 8 and I could never afford the big one. And then one day it just kind of struck me like, wait a minute, we have the internet these days. I bet you I can find this on the internet. And I couldn't remember. I was like, I think it's called an ooze tube. I don't know, the label is long gone off this thing. It's like, I think it's called an ooze tube. I searched it in about 5 seconds, found a site that sells ooze tubes, and I saw that there's a bigger version, and I was like, oh my gosh. And I think it was $13 or something like that. So I immediately went out and bought the big one too. And if you notice, they're like completely 2 different colors. I don't know if it's the same company that makes them anymore. I mean, this is, easily 20 years old or more at this point. So I bought another one. I requested a blue one, but they sent me a green one. Oh well. So that's it now. So now I have 2 of them. I think this one's a longer hourglass time of like 20 minutes or something like that. I don't know. That's not really important, but I just love these things, and I just thought it was something fun to kind of incorporate into the Q&A. So that's my big complicated story, but you can go out and buy them. I'm not affiliated with Ooze Tubes or anybody that sells them, but if you think they're cool, go ahead and knock yourself out. So all that said, let me get to the actual questions that you probably will find pertinent and important. So the first thing I want to address is I had, Freddy on Ink Nouveau. You posted a comment that was really tough for me to read, but it was very necessary, and I want to thank you for that. So basically, I'm not going to read the whole thing because it was very long, but basically you said that though you appreciate what I'm doing here, that the Q&A format you don't really feel is right. You would rather have it in a written format or have it something more like the Right Time broadcast where Rachel and I were doing that together. For those of you not familiar, Right Time was a broadcast. We did close to 100 of them back in the early days of the business when we were running it out of the house. My wife and I would have a live streaming broadcast with a chat that we would take questions, and we'd have kind of topics, and we would just shoot it on our sofa, and it was real low key. We did it, first on Tuesday nights and then on Wednesday nights, and it was really kind of a fun thing for us to do. But eventually, what happened is we had our son, and then we had our daughter, and once we had our daughter as well as our son, it really became too much. We were, managing a staff at that point. We had 2 kids, and our daughter was up in crazy hours of the night and stuff like that. It became very, very burdensome for us to do it. So we went on a hiatus. We tried to bring it back, and it was still just too much to do with everything else that we had going on. So we essentially just kind of killed it because we couldn't handle it. So that's why we don't have Right Time anymore. Even though we did love the format, we know that everybody enjoyed it, we just couldn't keep it up anymore. And so in order to kind of keep it going, asking the questions, I did set up Mailbox Monday, which was basically just the emails that I was already answering for people. I was publishing them publicly on my blog so that more than one person would get the information that I was spending the time drafting in these emails. Well, eventually that even became too burdensome, and I kind of lost something in the Mailbox Monday. There was kind of a disconnect just with the community that I felt. Even though I was getting these emails just kind of individually, it was kind of a personal conversation, but then publicly when I was posting them, I would get very little comments on them. Not a lot of people would, people would want me to publish my email address so that they could ask me questions, but honestly, emails take so much time that I again was having a problem with production time and being able to keep that up. And that's something I've always kind of struggled with, especially because videos and producing this kind of stuff is very time consuming. I do it for free in addition to all the tasks that I have actually running our company here. We got 17 people working here now, and it's a lot to manage. We have our 2 kids that we bring to work every day. It's really a lot going on, and I've got a lot of responsibilities. Rachel's got a lot of responsibilities, and so we have to really kind of maximize, the effectiveness of putting out stuff for our time involved. And so the Q&A thing was something I kind of settled on because, it was publicly, people could ask questions, I could answer them publicly, could get a lot of good conversation going. That was really kind of the intent, was the Q&A was something that was, I saw a lot of potential there for generating good conversation, as well as just answering a lot of good questions. So I think, and I'm kind of still tweaking it too. I'm not completely settled on like, this is Q&A and this is how it's gonna be forever. I'm very open to it. In fact, as I'm doing today, I'm trying out, talking a little bit about other stuff first. Sort of like the Right Time way we used to do it. When we had Right Time, we basically have a couple of topics, talk about them, and then answer questions kind of throughout as they would come up during the broadcast. Well, it's gonna be a little bit different now. I'm gonna try and come up with kind of themes and topics and stuff for Q&A, and maybe I'll talk about stuff and kind of have a set topic that I'll talk about, and then I'll answer questions that I get from all the various places. So still working on it, still tweaking, but Freddy, I appreciate where you're coming from. I really do. And I know that there are other people that feel that way, just like you do, who aren't saying anything. So I want to thank you for actually bringing it to my attention and getting the conversation going. So one of the things that I'm going to do is I really want to get an idea of what is most effective for you. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to post a survey to this video on the blog and on YouTube. I maybe also put it on Facebook and Twitter. I'll have to see. I'm sure I can link to all those places. The only people, if you're in the podcast, you'll have to go to one of these other places to pick that up. But I just want to know, what it is that you find most valuable that I'm doing, so that I know that if I'm spending my time doing something that no one really cares about, I can stop doing that and spend my time on other things. I have a general idea of what people like and what's most effective, but I want to make sure that I'm really making the best use of my time, getting the most information out of my head and out into your eyeballs as possible, and eardrums. So that said, I'm going to be posting that at some point, so look out for that. So next question here, I got Jeremy on Ink Nouveau. He said, Brian, I appreciate your work. Can you please release these as audio podcasts so I can listen to your Q&As in the car as opposed to needing to watch a video? Thanks for considering it. That is a good idea. It's something that I knew as soon as we started this, that would be something that you'd want. Back when I was doing Right Time, I was doing that. I would do an audio version and a video version. That was a much longer one though, so the file size was huge for those videos. These Q&As are not quite as bad, so I was kind of debating about whether or not to do that. It's really not an incredible amount more work. It's a little more hassle to do the audio version, but if enough people want it, it's definitely something I can look into. So I am looking into that right now. If you really want the audio version in a podcast of the Q&As, let me know. If enough people are asking me for it, that'll definitely push me to get that done. So I am considering it. So I can't say for sure it's going to happen right now, but if we do make it happen in the future, we'll go back and make all of the older versions available too, so don't worry about that. JLT on email. I have a hankering to purchase a couple of Platinum Preppies to use as highlighters and rollerball pens. However, I'm not fond of the pen logo on the ones that are available for purchase, and from what I've read, it's not easy to scrape the logo off the stamped ones. That is true. I really like the fact that Noodlers is able to get them without the logo. Therefore, my question for you is, are you able to special order the unstamped version of this pen? Or can you recommend a similar size pen and weight that has a clear body and be converted into an eyedropper? Okay, so basically you're asking me, can I get the pens without logos? And the answer is no. I don't know what kind of relationship that Nathan and Noodlers has with Platinum to get those pens, but I can imagine he is buying gobs of them. And all the Noodlers inks that come with those Platinum Preppies, they only come with the black and the fine nib. So if I was even able to get one, I'm sure I would only be able to get one type. And it's really just not even the kind of thing that Platinum makes available. They must have a really special thing going on for him to make that happen. As far as removing it, technically that thing is like screen printed on there, and basically it's not a sticker or anything. It can come off. You need to physically remove it off of there, which basically means sanding it away and then polishing the plastic back to a sheen, which is just an unbelievable amount of work, and you need some fairly specialized sandpaper and stuff to be able to make it happen, acrylic polish, that kind of stuff. It would probably take you about 3 or 4 hours, honestly, to be able to do it. I did some pen work with acrylics and stuff before doing the retailing thing, and it would be a lot of work, especially for a $4 pen. So basically, you don't really have that option unless you get one with the Noodlers pen, with the Noodlers inks. So you're asking me, can I recommend a similar size pen and weight with a clear body? I don't really have anything that's exactly that size with a clear body or anything. I mean, I can recommend some that I'm aware of, but everything's gonna be a compromise. I mean, like the Noodlers Ahab would be one. It's much bigger, it's a little heavier, it's got a flex nib, but you could replace that flex nib with a regular one, number 6 nib, but then you're looking like the $35 range for that whole package to make that happen. I don't know if that's quite what you were thinking of as far as the Preppy goes. The Noodlers Conrad, you can do the same thing. You're in the same boat. It's not an eyedropper. It's a piston fill, but it's got a good ink capacity. Some other things is the TWSBI pens like the 580, the Mini, the VAC 700. Those are even more expensive, even heavier. So I don't know if those will be worth considering for you, but those are some other ones I'm throwing out there. Another thing that comes to mind is the Kaweco Sport. They have a clear version of that. It's a shorter pen and a different shape than the Preppy. A little more expensive too, in the $25 range or something like that. And actually, I recently heard that the US distributor for Kaweco is not bringing them in anymore. So I don't really know where you can find them anymore. I used to carry them, a year and a half ago or so. I dropped them, but that would be another thing you could explore as well. Thomas R on Ink Nouveau said, for those out there who like to blend their shades of ink together to create their own custom shades, any suggestions? Have you tried blending your own variations? A little bit. I've messed around a little bit with the Platinum Mix Free. Those are inks that are actually made to be mixed with each other. There's 9 different colors. You can mix them into 81 different shades. If you do it 50-50, you can do different ratios to get even different colors. Honestly, for me, for ink mixing, I haven't dove in too deep, probably because I'm spoiled, because I have access to 600 plus other ink colors. And so for me, if I want to get a particular shade, chances are pretty good I've already got an ink that I can get near that shade, and I have ink samples that are done up. I have a whole aisle of ink samples. I can just go back and grab one anytime. So for me, in my unique situation, I'm pretty spoiled, and I haven't really explored ink mixing too much, other than just for my own sake of curiosity. I know a lot of the motive for ink mixing is if you have several bottles of ink already, why not mix a little bit, see if you can get another color without having to go buy new ink? Because it's not, if you've got several bottles of ink, chances are pretty good you're not going to use up all of every of those bottles of ink. anytime soon. So mixing is something that seems very natural to want to do, and I totally get that. But the best thing that I can recommend is actually to check it out on the Fountain Pen Network. There's a really good place to be able to see that. So if you go to the Fountain Pen Network here, it's just fountainpennetwork.com/forum. Scroll all the way down to the bottom, and you will see that there is a section called Creative Expressions, and at the bottom of Creative Expressions is Inky Recipes. And if you click on that, you will see that there are all kinds of great formulations that other people have come up with. Index of recipes here that you can click on, and you can see that there are all kinds of neat colors that people have come up with. Various members of Fountain Pen Network and who've already played around. There is more information here than I could possibly say in this video, but this would be a great place for you to dive in. You can ask questions about mixing ink, or you can see what other people have already done to get some really cool effects. My next question comes from Bourgoisie on Ink Nouveau. You asked, what nib size do you find yourself using the most? I know these vary depending on the manufacturer, but do you prefer a thick line or a thinner one? Honestly, when I first got into fountain pens, I was all about stub nibs, italics. I loved them. Actually, the first pen that I really used on a regular basis was a Pelikan Script 1.0. For me, that was just a great pen. I didn't actually like the pen itself. The pen itself I really kind of hated. I hated the size, I hated the weight, I hated the shape, everything. But I did like the way the nib wrote. So I used that for a long time when my means were very limited. As I got more into pens, I got into much nicer ones, and I've got a lot of different stubs and italics and stuff, and I really, really love italic nibs. I tend to gravitate more towards the 1.0, 1.1 size. Not so, I mean, every now and then I'll do a 1.5, but that's really just kind of too big for writing, you know, normal lined paper. I like the 1.1 size. So I do those. I do a little flex nib stuff every now and then, not with regular writing necessarily, but I do like to play around with it. And when I want to write something kind of fancy and special, I will bust that out. Generally speaking though, if you're talking about just everyday writers, I tend to go with a medium nib. I'm kind of in that road. I know actually that most people prefer extra fine and fine nibs. For me personally though, I have complete control over the paper that I use in my workplace scenario because, you know, I get to choose what is bought here. So we use good paper here at the Goulet Pen Company, and so I don't really have to restrict myself to a smaller nib size to try and prevent feathering and bleeding and stuff like that. I'd rather change the paper, and then I can choose whatever nib I want. I love shading, I love ink colors that pop, and so I like to use a little thicker, a little broader nibs. Sometimes I'll use a broad, a lot of times medium tends to be my general, but I appreciate, you know, the finer nibs too, especially if I'm writing in a situation where I don't have control over the type of paper that I'm using. Extra fine or fine nib is tolerable for me, not preferred at all because it's tough to get shading and things like that, but that's what my preference tends to be. But I totally appreciate other people have different preferences. Blue Moon on Ink Nouveau said, hey Brian, didn't you used to carry Kaweco pens? Do you think that you may sell them again? Also, do you think that sometime in the future you'll increase your selection of Schaeffers? I already kind of touched on the Kaweco. We don't carry them, and I don't know that we will anytime soon because there is no US distributor for them anymore. If they get a different distributor, I would be open to exploring it again. Part of the problem that we had carrying them before is that the distributor was only bringing in medium nibs on all the pens. So if you wanted to carry an extra fine or a broad or double broad or whatever, or italics, we actually, when we were carrying them, had to special order all of the other nib sizes of those pens, and there were large quantities to go along with ordering those, and so for us it was like an inventory nightmare, and it would take 3 to 4 months for stuff to come in. It was crazy, and you had customs and all these crazy things. So it was really, really, really hard for us to carry them and stock them regularly. So eventually it just kind of wore us down. Even though we liked the pens, we just couldn't keep it up anymore. And it seems that that was probably the situation for most everybody else too, because, you know, now that relationship is gone. I have nothing against Kaweco or the brand or the pens or anything. I really like them. In fact, I wish that we could have an easier distributorship to be able to carry them successfully again. But, you know, so I would be open to carrying them again, but there would have to be some things that would change, you know, kind of behind the scenes to be able to make that happen. And then you also asked me about, you know, increasing the selection of Schaeffers. I don't get asked a lot about Schaeffers, to be quite honest with you. I don't know if it's just because they're very available at a lot of other places. I know a lot of office supply stores will sell Schaeffers, and even Walmart sells certain Schaeffers and stuff. So, you know, if it's something that's that widely available, a niche company like us probably isn't going to do that well with them. We have tried before. You know, we carry some, the Schaeffer 100 and the VFM. We've tried the Preludes and the, you know, the 300s. So I would be open to it again. You know, I don't have any beef with Sheaffer. I like their products. In fact, I recently got a Tyrannus and a Cigaris, and I'm going to try those out, see what they're like. So if you have any Sheaffers that you really love and you want them, I mean, we can especially order them. But it's more for me about, you know, are people asking me for them? And not a lot of people are asking me for Sheaffers. So I'm kind of always been responsive to people and what they're asking me. And if no one's asking me about them, I'm not going to be all that inclined to want to carry it myself unless I just happen to take a personal interest in it and want to try it. Nicky on Ink Nouveau, you said, I have a crazy plan to have at least one ink in each color of the rainbow. I don't think that's that crazy. That sounds kind of cool, actually. All other colors have been easy enough, but for some reason I can never seem to find a green or orange that I like. The greens are always too dull and the orange is too light for me to see on the page. What colors do you recommend? Well, there are some good greens and oranges. I've got some of my favorites. Pretty much all Noodlers and Diamine, honestly. They just seem to have a good selection of these particular shades. Some of my favorite greens, Diamine Apple Glory, Diamine Kelly Green, it's a little bit darker. Apple Glory is like, bow, it's like the brightest green that I think I've ever seen. Kelly Green's a little bit darker, so that one might be a little better. It's more like an emerald green. And then Noodler's Green Cactus or Green Cactus Eel, they're very similar shade. The eel is a lubricated, you know, depending on what your needs are. So that would be one to explore too. For oranges, Diamine Pumpkin is one of my favorites. That ink, you know, it tends to crust up on the nib a little bit. It's a little higher maintenance to clean and whatnot, but I still love that color. Diamine Sunset, a little darker than Pumpkin. That's one to explore. And then a couple Noodler's options here, Habanero and Cayenne are both a couple of good, pretty saturated, darker orange colors. So those are ones that you should definitely check out. PapaKuma on Ink Nouveau. What do you lust over, or what is your holy grail pen? Now, the Holy Grail pen is a term that a lot of people online will talk about. Basically, like, what is the one pen that you want? It's probably some super uber expensive or some super rare pen that's really hard to find. For me personally, I honestly don't have one. And I know that sounds crazy, or may even sound, you know, sacrilegious in the pen world. But you know, for me, it's like I really enjoy the pens that I have. I've got a decent collection now. In fact, I've got, you know, cases of pens right here that I'll show you in just a second, because the next question kind of leads into that. But basically, you know, I have several pens in the past that I've really built up to be something just completely incredible and mind-blowing. I have like a Pelikan M800 with a 1.5 Italic that I lusted after for a long time. And then when it came out, you know, it's a great pen, but it didn't quite live up to my probably unrealistic expectations when I got it. It was very expensive, and I was a little disappointed with the way that it wrote. And so for me, it's like the higher I build up something in my mind, the more unrealistic I'm probably being. So for me, I've always enjoyed pens that are really good value, and I've always enjoyed, you know, having a lot of different pens and being able to play with them. So while I have pens that I certainly would like to get in the future, you know, Visconti Homo Sapiens, I've heard so many people talk about those. I don't sell those. You know, we've contacted Visconti and they're not interested in taking online retailers right now. Maybe you could contact them and tell them that they should change their minds. But anyway, so, you know, we don't have Visconti, and you know, it's an expensive pen, and even though I've heard a lot about it and it's really cool, you know, it's like $600, and I got 2 kids, and I can't stomach that right now, and I don't want to build it up as to something. I'd rather be satisfied with what I've got. So I've got a lot of great pens, and I really enjoy them. So for me, it's not so much about building it up into some, you know, huge expensive pen. It's rather, you know, I'd rather focus on you know, more being happy with what I have. So I'm probably not it's probably not what I should tell you. I should tell you that you should buy really expensive pens that I carry, but that's just the honest truth with me. For me at this stage in my pen collecting life, you know, I've been in pens for 4 or 5 years now, so I'm really kind of happy with what I've got. I'm definitely open to getting into, you know, more Holy Grail type pens in the future, but just honestly at this moment, I don't have one particular pen that I'm lusting after. So, but if you do, I'd love to hear it. Tell me in the comments. I'd love to hear what your Holy Grail pens are. So going off of that, Andrew M. asked me in an email, said, what's your current pen rotation schedule like? Being the proverbial kid in the candy shop, how often do you rotate daily writers? How many pens do you have inked up at one time? Is there a pen that you always have inked? So I already talked about, if you've seen my video recently in the top 3 daily carry pens, You know, I've got the Pilot Custom 74 with a medium nib in blue. I've got the Lamy 2000 with a medium nib, which I may end up changing that to a fine. I don't know, the medium is a little broad sometimes, but I love how smooth it is though. I don't know, I may change that to a fine, I'm not sure. And then I've got a Pilot Metropolitan, which I actually just really enjoy as kind of a knock-around pen. So those are the three that I always have inked. I've got some other ones like the Monteverde Nighthawk that I usually have hanging around. Other various pens, I love the Pilot Custom 823. I often have that, you know, not too far from me. Platinum Cool, you know, just other things. Basically, whatever kind of newer pen has come out, whatever I'm reviewing for a video recently, you know, I'll ink it up, play with it for a bit, shoot a video on it, kind of hang out with it for a while after that. So I have kind of a rotation of, you know, maybe 6 or 8 pens at a time that I'll have inked up and kind of ready to go. But in all honesty, I don't clean out my pens as often as I should. I know I don't practice what I preach sometimes when it comes to pen maintenance. I'm the kind of guy that I'll have way too many pens inked up because I just get so excited about trying different pens, trying different ink colors, that I'll end up having the ink kind of dry out in the pen, and then I've got to do like a full-on cleaning, you know, scrubbing, you know, all that kind of stuff. So I could benefit more from just cleaning out my pens if I'm realistic with myself about how long it's going to be before I pick it back up and write with it. But I probably have 40 different pens inked up at any one time. I just get so excited sometimes when I ink them up. So that's what it's like. So as far as rotation goes, you know, I usually keep my pens, you know, a couple of weeks. I don't have a strict rotation schedule. I'm more of a, you know, what do I feel like doing? That's really, for me, the pens is like, you know, I'm using this pen. I feel like using this for a month, you know, or I use it for 2 days and it's like, I don't feel like using this anymore. I really just kind of, I just kind of go on a whim. So yeah, how many pens do I inked at one time? You know, basically I've got just cases of pens here. I've got, you know, all of these cases are pretty much filled with pens. And then I've even got like some rolls of pens that are just some cheap rolls. So I've got, I don't know, 80, 100 pens. I haven't even counted them, honestly, lately. That, and I've got several other ones that are in cases and ones that I'm, you know, reviewing or taking apart or inspecting or doing at any one time. So it's really just like I'm just deep in pens every day, and you're probably just drooling and going crazy right now. And yeah, I do kind of have the life when it comes to pens. Perks of the job, you know. So anyway, hopefully that answers your question there. So next question here, maltharius on YouTube. You said, with all the inks that you reviewed and put their paces, and all of the pens you get to play with and taught us with, what are you doing with them? Are you writing letters, journals, penning the next great American novel? With all that testing that you must do for your company, it almost seems like you would spend hours a day in a room scratching away the mysteries of the universe like some character from a Tom Brown book. Well, you're making it out to be much more romantic and fantastic than the reality is for me. You know, I've got a lot of different uses that I have for these pens. I am really passionate about them. It's rare that I'll ever pick up anything besides a fountain pen. Every now and then if I have to, you know, carbon copy a check or something like that. You know, I'm not like super uber hardcore about always having to use a fountain pen. I am realistic that there is a small percentage of time when it is acceptable to use something else if you must. But generally speaking, I've pretty much got fountain pens on me all the time, and if I'm writing something down, it's with a fountain pen. So that said, I'm also into technology for my business's sake. I'm blogging a lot. I'm doing a lot of stuff, you know, on Twitter and Facebook and all those various forums and things. So I do use my laptop a lot, do video production stuff. I've got my smartphone, and I'm doing that a lot. So, you know, definitely technology is a big part of it, but for most of my personal stuff, you know, I'm testing pens a lot, reviewing them, just writing with them. I actually keep a couple of journals for my kids that I started the day they were born, and so I'll journal every so often just to kind of update, you know, my life and what, you know, impart some wisdom upon them in journal form. I do that. Not as often as I should, but you know, I do have that journal, so it's there. It's meant to be over their life. I'll give it to them when they graduate high school or college or something like that. And then I use them for, you know, writing notes, writing letters to people. I will, you know, when I'm thinking of ideas for videos, I will often write my ideas and stuff in actual note form as opposed to, you know, doing it in technology. For certain things, like with the Q&A here, I'll have all my questions kind of pulled up because I'm pulling from them from emails and from, you know, blog comments and stuff like that. So it makes more sense to keep those in digital form. But when I'm creating something just raw with white space, like, oh, I need to do a video, what could I do? I almost always go to pen and paper, just because I really like that. I make to-do lists pretty much every day that I will, you know, physically write down the to-do list. So that's what I'm using it for. So, you know, in that sense, I am using the pens very practically, I guess. The journaling for my kids is probably the most, you know, romantic thing that I do with the pens, you know, and the handwritten notes and correspondence and stuff like that. But that's essentially what I have. You know, I'm not penning a novel or anything like that. You know, I did actually have aspirations early on in my fountain pen career of transcribing the Bible, and then when I actually did the math about how long it would take to do that, I think it was something like spending an hour a day. It would take me 4.5 years or something like that. It's kind of insane. And this was when I had my son. He was like a month old at this point, and he's going to be turning 4 in January. And so I was thinking to myself, wow, you know, that's kind of a long time. I'm not sure if that is something I can afford to do at this stage of my life. But yeah, that's something I'd be open to in the future. But anyway, so that's what I got going on. And I think I could get to one more question here. Maybe 2 more. I can squeeze in 2 more. Okay, so Amamiya on K on Facebook said, I've got a question regarding the Pilot VP here. Every time when the nib is pushed out front, it has to be pushed onto this tongue thingy. It's located on the front inside to keep the pen from drying out, I guess. Wouldn't that damage the nib? I remember you said in a video that we should even avoid bumping the nib with the inside of the body of the pen when refilling. Then wouldn't the pressure of pushing it onto the tongue, or the cap, sorry, I don't know what it's called, every time when using it be even more damaging? So what Amamiya is talking about here is, you know, here's a Pilot Vanishing Point. It's a click pen, so it has this fountain pen nib that retracts and extracts out of the pen. So what happens is there's this tongue, I guess, like this little trap door that you know, keeps the nib from drying out. So when you push the click mechanism, the nib is coming out, and right, you know, you can't see it that far out, but right at this one point that you can see that there's actually the tip of the nib that rubs over top of the edge of that tongue. Now after that point, it's the feed that's actually pushing it, but there is this one little point where the nib is actually rubbing over top of that little trap door. And you know, you're not the first one to ask me about it. Other people have asked me before, and the honest to goodness truth is, I don't know if it you know, is anything that should be of concern, but they're all like that. So this pen has been around they're celebrating their 50th anniversary this year. So it's an extremely popular pen. It's been around for 50 years, and I have never once heard of that actually causing a problem. So even though I can look in there and I can see exactly what you're talking about, and I would have the very same question myself, the honest truth is it just hasn't been a problem. So I don't think it's anything really to worry about. Now, one thing I can say is part of the reason why it's not a problem is because, you know, the actual tipping material that's on the tip of this nib is extremely hard metal. It's like an iridium alloy, very, very, very tough stuff. It's definitely going to be a harder metal than whatever is used in this little trap door. So just with that thing rubbing over the trap door a little bit, you know, it's very smooth, very rounded, doesn't have a scratchy feeling to it as you're doing it. I don't think it's going to cause any kind of a problem, and if anything was to wear down, it would be the trap door, not the tip of the nib. And so the reason that I recommend when you're actually taking the nib in and out of being careful is because there is this one point inside the pen where you could actually kind of hook it onto something and bend it and damage it. That's why I say you should be careful when putting it back, whereas if you have it scraped on the side, you can actually get it caught on part of the pen in there, and if you try to bend it or do it the wrong way, you can actually misalign the tines and stuff. You know, it's not so much a scratching thing, it's more of a bending thing. So that's why I say to be careful with it putting it back in. So hopefully that helps to ease your fears a bit. And the last question I have is from Facebook. Your name, I'm sorry, I cannot pronounce it because it is in characters, but you said, is Zhivago black or is it green? I don't need another black, but a really dark green intrigues me. The swab, though, just looks black. Should I go with Sequoia instead? So these are both Noodler's colors that you're talking about. Zhivago is green. It really is. It's a really dark green. Like the darkest green that I can think of. If anybody wants, you know, a green black, Zhivago would be the color that I would recommend. So yeah, I would definitely say you should check out Zhivago. Get a sample of it if you're able. Sequoia is not nearly like that. If you want a really dark green, Sequoia is pretty dark, but it's not going to be as dark as Zhivago. Zhivago is really a cool color, and it would be the one I'd recommend that you try. So that said, that is about all the questions that I have for this week. Thank you so much for joining me here. You know, for next week, I am going to go back to a theme. It'll be October 11th. It'll be episode 8. And the theme that I'm going to have is going to be inside the Goulet mines. And what I mean by that is basically I get asked a lot about, you know, how I started this business, or, you know, why we do certain things, why we develop certain tools on our site, why we do certain things on the blog or the podcast, whatever. Rachel and I have built this business from the ground up in our dining room over the last 4 years, and we've just got a really kind of a cool story to tell, and I love telling it. So I'm happy to share with you any questions that you have about maybe why we do things the way that we do. You know, if you're asking specific things about like proprietary stuff, I'm not going to answer that, but I'm more than happy to share with you, you know, things about like our company's values, where we want to move going forward, you know, some stories about what it was like in the early days starting out, maybe what it was like to move the business out of our house, what it's like to have our kids at work. I'm more than happy to talk about any of that kind of stuff. So if you are curious at all about anything about how we operate kind of inside the company, or curious about some of the, you know, more you know, theoretical kind of things that we like to think about here in the way we operate the company, I'd love to hear some of your questions there. So you can post those on this video of episode 7 here on YouTube or on the blog Ink Nouveau. If you're watching this on the podcast, you'll need to go to one of those and then ask the question. Or also you can answer on Facebook, Twitter, or you can also email us at orders@gouletpens.com and ask us questions there. I'll take all those questions from all these various sources and compile them, you know, post them in the most relevant form that I think I can answer, and then put them out for next week. So that said, thank you so much for joining me for another Goulet Q&A. I really enjoy this format. I like just being kind of informal, laid back, and talking with you. You know, thanks for showing up. Thanks for asking questions. If you're not asking questions, I really have no reason to be here. So if you ever stop, then I will stop. But I don't want to stop. So come on, keep asking me questions. Keep hanging out with me. I'd love to hear what you think. Thanks so much. And as always, right on.